today, which is actually Minya Gill and Paul Gill from Stewart Title Guaranty Company. And they're going to talk to us today about a few things relating to title insurance, including whether title insurance, we often get questions such as, is title insurance mandatory? Do I need to get that? It's expensive. What does it cover? And also, hopefully, we can touch on a few points which relate to real estate fraud and what's the new hot trend in terms of fraud in real estate. So on that note, I would like to pass on the presentation to Minya and Paul.
Hi, good morning, Jennifer.
Hi.
And good morning, everyone out there. First of all, thank you for having us, Jennifer. We really appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, so I am here from Stewart Title as the Residential Business Development Manager. I take care of the Mississauga and Bolton areas. I've been with Stewart Title for 11 years coming up in August. And 4 years ago, I decided to come out on the road, get to know a different side of the company, and I'm enjoying it quite well. Obviously with COVID, it's put some workarounds in terms of how I'm dealing with my clients, and for the most part, technology has become my best friend. I'm learning it very quickly with the help of my husband and my 2 millennial kids. So it's been a great ride so far, and I am here today to speak about the residential side of title insurance, and then my partner in crime, Paul Gill, will speak about the fraud aspect. So just a quick disclaimer about the information that we're going to share with you today. The information is exactly what it is. It's information purposes only. So the coverages, search requirements, processes. If you've got any specific questions, I would urge clients and realtors to contact Stewart Title directly. We're happy to speak with you on a particular situation. So I'm just going by what I've got here in terms of my information and explaining what Stewart Title does. First of all, about us, we are a leading title insurance company. We have been, well, our roots go back to 1893, small office in Texas. And but today we stand proudly as one of the largest title insurance companies. We have over a century experience in protecting owners and lenders against title risks that come with residential and commercial transactions. And we've become a global leader in the world. We actually have a multitude of international markets, including Australia, Canada, the Caribbean, Europe, Mexico, and the US. In Canada, we are the leader in the Canadian title insurance market. We have become the preferred choice for many legal professionals, simply because we've come to know and trust Stewart Title. They've become to know and trust Stewart Title as a qualified partner and a reliable insurer that delivers results. So what is a title insurance policy? It's a policy of indemnity that insures against loss or damage arising from title defects, as well as many forms of title fraud. It also covers off many off-title matters, including surveys and zoning. It's available for a one-time low premium, and coverage is valid for the entire time your clients own their home. And it can even be transferred to the beneficiaries upon the insured's death. We also have continuation of coverage in the policy jacket, wherein spouses are transferring the property between one another, parents transferring the title of the home to their children. There's no need for a new policy. The continuation of coverage remains. So is it mandatory? It's not mandatory, but what we are seeing today, especially from lenders, is that mortgage fraud is one of the biggest areas of claims. Also, we have survey issues. So owners most likely may not have a survey, so the premium offsets those costs. So definitely when lenders are asking for it, we abide, the customer abides, and then at the same time, the owner policy is issued at a fraction of the cost. offering a multitude of coverages to the owner as well as the lender. So the value of title insurance, it provides superior coverage and protection. So obtaining a title insurance policy from Stewart Title not only reduces closing costs, but also brings peace of mind to your clients during and after the closing process. So there are two types of policies that are issued for residential purchase transactions. The residential gold owner policy is to protect your client's title to the property. And then the residential gold loan policy protects the priority and the enforceability of the mortgage for the lender. In both instances, we have valuation coverage. So the owner does get 200% inflation value coverage, and the lender gets 125% inflation value coverage. And the policies can be issued for residential dwellings of up to 6 units, condominiums, vacant land, cooperatives, leased land, and even current homeowners who didn't obtain a title insurance when they first purchased their property. So this will most likely go back to the 80s and 90s when title insurance was not as prevalent. We issue an existing owner policy with the current assessed value. A current assessed value of the property can be obtained by obtaining a realtor's letter of opinion, referring to the tax bill, which will have the most recent assessed value, as well as obtaining an impact statement.
Minya, one of the questions I often get from clients is, what does it cover? Why would I get that? What does it do to me? Like, what does it cover? What does the owners?
So fraud would be fraud is the #1 coverage that owners would want. Obviously, we've seen fraud happening where clients' properties are fraudulently being taken away from them. There's fraudulent mortgages being registered on title. So all of these are going to result in a multitude of costs for the owner of the property to get the title, first of all, back into the rightful owner's name. Of course, any mortgage fraud. Now, that is also prevalent, and we have to, we review that. We ensure that there's, first of all, fraud that's occurred, and Paul will speak more on that, but we provide coverage for mortgage fraud that happens. Also, unknown title defects that could happen. You know, the owner moves in, there's an open work permit, that sort of thing. We would look at covering that. Also, taxes. Realty taxes, actually, I should say, are the biggest ones. So realty taxes, owner moves in, vendors not paid their share of the taxes. So now the owner is stuck with this, with the tax bill. So now that is something, of course, we get on a very frequent basis. And of course, we would cover the purchaser up until the day of closing. And then we either send the check to the tax department on their behalf, or if the purchasers made that payment, we will reimburse the owner. So potential for quicker closings, that's the value of the title insurance and the benefits. So waiver of many of the standard off-title inquiries can result in lawyers being able to close on time while providing client protection against adverse matters that would have been disclosed by waived searches. Also, discovery of last-minute title or off-title defects may prevent a transaction from closing on time. So our experienced underwriters will work with the client's lawyer to provide coverage for many known title defects. The ability to underwrite such a defect often facilitates the closing of a transaction that may otherwise not close. So when you're drafting the agreement of purchase and sale, and acting for the buyer, you want to retain the usual warranties and conditions, such as home inspections, satisfactory water potability tests, as these matters are not covered by a title insurance policy. You also want to be wary of the offer to insure over. In the field of title insurance underwriting, there is a general distinction between forced compliance coverage and marketability coverage. And when you're acting for the seller, consider obligating the offer to insure over. The best place to influence the applicability of title insurance in the wording of the agreement and purchase and sale. So in this case, you may want to contact, the lawyer may want to contact the underwriters, make sure that the wording is sufficient and it is wording that a title insurer would agree upon for such defects. So we want to make sure that the proposed wording with the lawyer is discussed ahead of time to receive the desired effect and confirm that the exact coverage is available from the title insurer before committing to any particular wording. So just quickly, a highlight of some covered risks, existing liens against title, violation of municipal zoning bylaws, encroachments onto adjoining property other than fences and boundary walls, setback violations, the realty tax arrears, existing work orders, and lack of legal access to the property. Gap coverage is automatically included in our residential and commercial policies, and it insures both purchasers and lenders against losses due to intervening registrations on title between the day of closing and the day of registration. So this particularly is very important during COVID. In the event that there's the online registration is not available, or the land titles or the registry offices experience delays in closure, the transaction can still close on time and funds and keys can be released to the respective parties. So additional advantages of title insurance specific to lenders: fraud, independent legal advice, post-closing alterations, gap coverage, assignability, enhanced mortgage portfolio. And I should mention remote signing endorsement is available for the lender, especially during COVID-19. We've offered this remote signing endorsement because it makes it easier for the lenders to find and understand it in the context of remote signing. The reason for the endorsement was to assist our lawyer clients with the many inquiries they are receiving. The coverage has always been there, but we felt that during COVID-19, this endorsement was important to have for the lenders. So something you want to consider that may not be covered by title insurance, or I should say we would look at this on a case-by-case basis. There may be instances where we may provide partial coverage. I'll go over the quick list here. It's functionality or quality, environmental contamination, water potability and quantity, legality of rents, fire retrofit compliance, chattels, future use consideration, and then we've got costs of moving fences or boundary walls, misrepresentation by the seller, and then other express limitations under a title insurance policy. So there might be title risks agreed to by the insured, title risks that result in no loss or are maybe known to the insured prior to closing. So that was a very quick highlight of what residential title insurance does and how Stewart Title plays a big part of a residential transaction. I've got Paul that's going to come up and speak to you about the fraud coverage. And Paul is my husband, and he's also the manager in the investigations unit for Stewart Title.
Right. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. Probably wondering why my wife's invited me to talk to you guys. I'm just going to give you a little background about myself. Prior to joining Stewart Title, I was a police officer for 32 years with Gill Regional Police. I was a detective for most of my career. And what I do within Stewart Title now, I've been there for about 3 years, is I investigate the fraud claims that come into us. And my job within that, I'm going to explain what I do. Been there for 3 years. We often hear from people wondering why we put such an emphasis on fraud within title insurance. The instances of fraud are not that prevalent, shall we say. We have a number of them come in every month, but the numbers aren't huge compared to, say, our number of our tax claims and such forth. What the difference is the values. So the simple fact is that last summer, I'll explain one situation. I'm going to go through an example with you later on. But there was a situation where we had 4 frauds in British Columbia. And I investigate all of them from pretty much east to west. This particular set involved us having to go out to British Columbia. Within those 4 frauds, there was over $4 million worth of coverage.
Wow.
So you can imagine how quickly the numbers rack up. When you look at the average title insurance policy at, say, about $1,000, you can imagine how many policies we have to underwrite to make up $4 million worth of fraud very, very quickly. So the numbers become very, very relevant just on the quantity, shall we say, is very minimal, but the value of the properties and such forth involved are so high. So what can you expect when submitting a claim to Stewart Title? Well, first of all, you can submit a claim via the online claims form on the next steps, within Stewart.com, Stewart.ca, sorry. You can fax it to us, you can email it to us at the address at claims.canada@Stewart.com, or you can even mail it to us. You will receive notification that we received your email, your correspondence and your claim in the same manner that you send it to us. So we assume that that's your preferred method of communication, the way you send it to us. Within that acknowledgement, which you'll get within 2 business days, is a claims number that you can use to reference your future claims. Future correspondence within that claim. The claim is then, if it's a fraud, it's reviewed by the senior managers in the claims unit. It is then assigned to one of our more experienced claims counsels. We have a number of different claims counsels that works within the claims department. We use a smaller subset of them to investigate fraud because it becomes somewhat of a specialized field, shall we say. That claims counsel will then meet with me and we'll discuss the fraud. I'll arrange for meetings with everyone involved. So some of these situations, they can get quite complex. We're talking about situations where we have to interview the insureds themselves, potential lenders, real estate agents, mortgage brokers. So we're in a situation where it can take a long time to investigate some of these. We're into a period of 6-7 months on some investigations. We expect that they will we interview everyone involved, and the insured has an obligation to cooperate with us. So if they're filing a claim, they're expected to be interviewed and to provide a statement of claim. The interviews can take some time. Then what happens is, after all the interviews take place, I will then prepare a report, and it will be sent back to the claims counsel. That claims counsel, based upon the report, will determine whether there is coverage within the policy for what has been alleged. They will make a decision. That decision is then reviewed by the claims counsel and the senior managers in the claims claims unit. And from there, that decision is then sent out to either the insured or to their counsel, depending on how the claim was received. One of the best ways to expedite a claim is to submit all your paperwork that you have in relation to the claim at the very beginning. One of the things that we get quite often is that it's somewhat of an incomplete claim. We'll get somebody saying something very minimal, and then we have to ask for more documentation. We're probably going to ask for more documentation anyway, because there's probably not going to be a full disclosure at the beginning, but it then allows us to start the investigation as soon as possible. Also, because there's usually monies involved, this adds to the ability potentially to have a method of recovery. We can get involved in the investigation earlier, we can involve the authorities earlier, then we will be in a position to maybe make a recovery of funds. So it's important to get that information as early as possible.
Paul, do you have
Yes.
any specific red flags or things that either a realtor or a lawyer should watch out for, and like specifically the types of fraud that are currently happening? Because I know fraudsters are evolving their methods, and I'm sure what fraud is now is very different than what it was 15 years ago. So what do you see currently, and what are the red flags?
So one of the things is that, as you said, trends within fraud. Fraud does evolve, and they have evolved to use more relevant technologies that are present now. What we found recently is that there's a large amount of very good quality false identification out And one of the things that you'll notice, if you go on a simple web search and you just punch in fraudulent identification or fake ID, there's people willing to sell you a fake Canadian driver's license of whatever province you want for 89 bucks or 90 bucks. And all you do is that's all it takes. And what they'll do is they'll sell it to you and they'll mail it to you back and basically say, here it is. All you do is send them a picture and the details that you want on that license. And that you'll get it back within a couple of weeks. And they're all mom and pop kind of operations. And then what this happens from is the fact that there is now a greater availability through technology of high quality etching kind of software. Also, there's laser printing. There's all kinds of different things that have allowed these fraudsters to now use that more often. So what are we seeing more of? We're seeing more fraudulent identification. We're also seeing a lot of corporate takeovers. Now, directorships within changes in Ontario are done online, which is a kind of weird process considering how simple it really is. And because of that, people working within organized crime, now this is usually where organized crime gets involved, is the corporate takeovers. They'll take over a company that has land, usually it's vacant land property, or it can be others, but usually it's vacant land in this case. They'll take over the ownership of that company that owns that vacant land, and then somebody purports to be having the authority to sign for mortgages on that vacant property. So that we've had quite often, we get that a lot. Another thing that was relevant quite a lot prior to COVID, and hopefully will be again after, is foreign-owned properties. So we had people that, because the Ontario and BC real estate markets were so good, we had a number of people investing in those properties, in those markets. We had people that would come from China or other parts of the world. And China is predominant because that's one of the things that we saw a lot of, is Chinese nationals being defrauded of, because they would not be in Canada very often, but they would own large properties, especially in British Columbia. From there, we had a number of frauds. The ones I talked about last year in British Columbia all involved Chinese nationals that did not really spend much of their time in Canada. What happened was that those people had their homes broken into. They obtained identifications. In some cases, they knew they were going to be gone for long enough that they were able to change locks on these properties and stayed there for a while, and allowing appraisals to take place, allowing for viewings. So you can see that these were very organized. This was in policing and in other terms, organized crime is usually separated into different categories. Traditional organized crime is what is referred to as what the people generally refer to as the mafia and such forth, is considered traditional organized crime. Then you have the Asian crime gangs, and then you have the motorcycle gangs. All these people are involved in fraud because fraud is lucrative. It's a simple way to do a crime. It doesn't carry a huge penalty in Canada, unfortunately, even if you're caught. The outlay is very minimal for them. They don't have to put out a lot of money to perpetrate a fraud, and those are the types of things you see. Now, you asked for warning signs of fraud, so we'll talk about that. This is not an exhaustive list, but one of the things that we found that we look for is that the property is either mortgage-free or near mortgage-free. So if you're lawyers, so that's one of the things to look for. Interest and fees on the mortgage are high. Now think about this for yourself. If you're negotiating your mortgage, you want to minimize both the interest and any fees that you want to pay, right? You don't want to pay anything more than you have to. For a fraudster, they don't care. They don't intend to pay the interest anyway, and the fees are just a cost of doing business for them. So here you have a fraudster that, say, is taking out a $750,000 mortgage on a $1 million property. Even if they pay $50,000 in mortgage fees to somebody, they don't care because they're still walking away with $700,000, right? So for them, it's just a simple cost of business. It's not their cost anyway. It's not being borne by them. And the interest rates, well, they're never intending to pay that anyway. So again, that's not borne by them either. So that's one of the things that you should look at, is the values on those. Elderly borrowers is a situation we get quite often. Sometimes they get taken advantage of by family, unfortunately. Not only is family your best friend, sometimes it's somebody that else has befriended them. I investigated a circumstance 2 years ago where a gentleman was living in these old age home at Sunnybrook, long-term care at Sunnybrook for the veterans. And he had a property in Toronto. It was a duplex. He had been befriended by the person that was the tenant in that duplex, then had a power of attorney.
Power of attorney.
Yep, to that person. And that person then tried to take a high value mortgage on his property. We caught it. Police became involved, and we were fortunate enough to be able to stop that one from happening. So things happen quite often. The other thing we see a lot of is when the client is brand new to you. That the fraudsters aren't going to go back to the same person. They're going to go to somebody brand new. They're going to go back and see, and you can see on other registered documents that the same lawyer has acted for the true owners before. So you'll have multiple transactions. This person's had multiple registrations on this property, and there's always been the same lawyer. And all of a sudden now they're coming to a different lawyer. Why is that happening?
Yes.
It can happen. There could be a legitimate reason for it, but it just incumbent upon you to maybe ask the question.
Warning.
The other thing that fraudsters do is they like to create a sense of urgency. So they want an urgent closing.
That one's a hard one because everything is urgent.
Very hard. And we work with you on that. But because we have additional resources that you probably will not have, both because of me and because of other people within Stewart Title, we will work on those and we will try to mitigate. One of the things we do provide as kind of an added service almost is our investigative ability to check on identification. We do that quite regularly. People will call us and say, you know what, I'm not sure about this identification. Can you do something to mitigate my concerns about it? And we will do our best. Can't always work that way, but we will do our best to mitigate those concerns. It's one of the more important things.
And I hear, Paul, one of the last point, because we're running out of time, but I hear one of the items that you mentioned is if you're acting on behalf of a corporation and that corporation is a new client to you and you don't know them, that to look for a Form 1 that has been recently filed to change one of the director, that should create, if you're a lawyer or a realtor involved in the transaction, that should probably prompt you to look further into whether that person really does have the authority to sign on behalf of the corporation, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you want to look at shareholder agreements, you want to look at minutes of meetings, you want to look at the books, you want to see those types of things and actually make those inquiries. I know it takes more time and it's, you know, it's like anything else, but you don't want to be involved in a fraud at the end of the day, right? It takes more effort to work your way out of it. There's potential for, you know, if you're a lawyer, for the law society to get involved, and we don't want that for anybody, right? We want you to be on the best side of this, and if you can mitigate a fraud, it's way better than trying to investigate it afterwards. That's for everyone, not for you only. It's for better for us, and that's why we work so hard to try to mitigate them in the first instance before they actually happen. It's why we have put on seminars for fraud. You know, we've done a number of webinars for fraud. We're continuing to do more webinars. I'm dealing with one tomorrow where it does nothing but identification. So I'm going to be discussing how to look at identification and nothing but identification, and how you can look at identification, see whether it's relevant, real, and go from there. So we work very hard on this.
Well, thank you. That's very informative. You know, what to watch out for us, lawyers, realtors, anyone that might be watching. And it helps also for us to explain to clients why title insurance is necessary, what it does for you. And it's not just fraud, as Minya mentioned, but it is a very large component because, as you said, those claims tend to have a bigger financial repercussions. I want to thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you speak, and hopefully we do this again. Anybody has any question, we'll follow up with you. But thank you again for being part of this presentation.